Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm thrilled as always to be here with you. I'm joined most thrillingly by my brother-in-arms, Mr. Paul Bindig. How are you, sir?
I'm also thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me again, David. I'm well. How are you?
Good. We've already had some laughs before recording, and the episode that we're about to bring to you is also full of a few laughs because for those of you that aren't located in the UK or Australia, there's a bit of a common bond there, aside from the fact that a lot of the original Australians that emigrated to Australia from England, not our original Australians, but those that came out from England, are convicts and criminals that England shipped out here to be rid of. So there's quite a common bond between us and the English, including our sense of humour. So as you'll see, our guest, Mr. Tom Seals, has had an amazing career. He's only in his 30s, but as you'll hear, he's done some absolutely stunning things, played with some of the world's best, is a great boogie-woogie piano player amongst many other things he can do. So we talk about his career, Paul, but he's, most importantly, a lot of fun on top.
Yeah, really top fella to talk to. And, I say this every time, David, but aren't keyboard players just the nicest people? And as you will hear shortly, everyone, we had a blast.
Yeah, it was an absolute blast. So, do jump in and join us in the fun, and we'll talk to you after the show. Tom, absolute pleasure to have you on the show, sir. We were just talking before the show. I was in the UK about a month ago, and it sounds like the weather has taken a UK turn for the worse.
Well, usual UK weather, really. I'm here in the northwest of England, a little place called Crewe, and it's back to the rain and the greyness.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have you here. So I thought, Tom, we'd kick off just talking a little bit about your 2024. You've certainly had an eventful few years, but just talk a little bit about what's been happening for you this year, and then we'll work our way backward.
Sure. This year's been, it's been a little bit weird. I've been sort of change of management, which has been a bit strange for me because there's then that sort of 6-month period of leaving the old management, going to the new management, learning how all of the new sort of procedures and how their sort of systems work. So that's been a little bit weird. Kind of a personal change as well. I went for a break at the end of last year, which has meant that my priorities in my work have changed because all of a sudden I need to buy a house. So you end up taking different paths and different avenues than I would have done maybe a year ago. So this year has been a real mixture of stuff, really. I've been doing weirdly less gigs with my band, and that's not been out of choice. That's been, I think, almost a decision that's been taken out of my hands, and I think a lot of people are feeling the same, that those sort of band gigs, especially in the UK, just aren't coming in as frequently. So I've been doing a lot of support slots. I've been opening up for people like Kiefer Sutherland. I've just done some support for him, and in a few weeks I'm going on the road with Creed Bratton from the US office. I do a thing called a guest entertainer gig on ships where I'll fly out, join a luxury 5-star ship, jump on board, sing a few songs and then leave. So I've been doing a few more of those than I normally do. But yeah, real mixture of stuff, which is cool.
And so I can't let you get away with just the gig issue because it's an interesting one and probably varies by country. Is it an issue of less venues for gigs, or the fact that post-COVID everyone is out touring and it's more a competitive atmosphere to actually be able to get a venue and play a gig?
My thought, and we've all got our own theories on it, my thought is that coming out of COVID there was such a backlog. There was maybe a 2-year backlog of gigs that had to happen. So then all of those gigs have now happened. And then, don't know whether just people don't have any money to go to the gigs, or the venues have stretched themselves over the past 2 years that they haven't got the budgets now. I don't find that the corporate-y stuff is coming in as much. I don't know. I think I'm really fortunate that, I play the piano and I sing, and I've always done solo gigs, but I do have that band as well. That I just don't know. I think that people are just opting for the cheaper option.
Yeah.
I think that might be the problem.
Absolutely could be right. Well, let's jump back in time. Thankfully, not as far back in time for you as it is for Paul and I, but let's talk about your musical upbringing. So what led Tom Seals to getting passionate about music and deciding to make a career of it?
Well, my granddad, so my dad's dad, had a big band, and they were playing all the classics, Sinatra, Count Basie, Duke Ellington. And I fell in love with that big band sound, that wall of noise. And so every week we'd go in Crewe here in the northwest of England to a place called the Crosville Club. And of course, we all know, no matter where we are in the world, we all know that Crewe is the showbiz capital of the northwest of England. People think it's Liverpool because of the Beatles, but actually it's not. It's Crewe. So we'd go to the Crosville Club, and like I said, they were playing all of those classic big band tunes, and I just loved it, and then I'm sure, you can imagine when I was probably years later, age 13 at school, listening to Glenn Miller, you could see why I was so popular. Of course not. But yeah, so I loved that music, and luckily we had a sort of piano knocking around at home. So I was probably tinkling the ivories at 5, 6 years old. And then my parents took me to see a guy called Jools Holland. And Jools quickly became my sort of piano hero, and he was playing boogie piano. So for me to see someone playing boogie-woogie rock and roll piano whilst leading a big band, that's really what sort of interested me in going down that road.
Yeah, so that's talking about your influences. So the big bands, seeing someone lead a band playing boogie-woogie piano. Have there been other artists, blues, boogie-woogie artists, that have potentially influenced the way you play or your style or your passion for that kind of music?
Jools became my hero, and then because of that, you then look at who Jools was influenced by, and then that then became my influences by listening to all the people that Jools was huge fans of. So I think but the interesting thing about specifically Jools was that when you go and watch his show, it wasn't just boogie. People associate him with being a boogie player, and probably people associate me now as being a boogie player, but actually there's so many more influences than just boogie. There's obviously your sort of swing and the jazz stuff, not as much with Jools and not necessarily as much with me, but obviously I then went down this sort of Oscar Peterson road of loving all of that stuff, and Albert Ammons and people like that. But then there was the sort of New Orleans influences, your sort of Dr. Johns and all those sorts of people. And even now John Cleary is one of my sort of, idols now, and there's no one better, is there, at doing that New Orleans piano thing. But I think that's an interesting thing with Jools and me, to some extent, that people come to my gigs, and because they're at places like Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club and they've got that word jazz in, they say, oh, we weren't sure we'd like jazz, but we like you. And that's because it's not jazz, it's jazz, swing, blues, boogie, pop, soul, funk. It's all of these things that we're also influenced by, and I just take little bits of those and try and make my own thing out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on the boogie-woogie, I've mentioned before on the show, we've had a few players on from the UK that love that genre. I'd have to argue outside of the US, boogie-woogie, I think it's got its second stronghold in the UK. So, I mean, why do you think that is? I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I've always wondered that as well. And probably Jools has got a lot. He's got a lot to answer for. No, I think Jools probably got a lot to thank for, because he sort of made. Obviously, Jools has had that BBC TV show every Friday night later with Jools Holland, and he's had the radio show, and he's had every guest you could possibly think of on that show. That he's probably kept boogie at not the forefront of any music here in the UK, but he's kept it kind of popular to some extent. But again, I would argue that on the European scene, there's such a huge love for boogie. See, I get much more gigs where they want me to play boogie in Europe. Poland, especially, Poland have got the Polish Boogie Festival. One of the most amazing piano players called Bartek Skopinski, one of my mates who is just one of the best boogie players on the planet. He runs the Polish Boogie Festival. And I thought, how's that going to be? And all of a sudden, you're in this field in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you fly to Gdansk, and then it's a 4-hour drive into the forest. And there's 5,000 people all swing dancing and jive dancing to boogie. It's like in the middle of nowhere. It's the most amazing thing. And then I've done some stuff in Vienna with the great Axel Svingenberg, one of the great boogie sort of pioneers. So Vienna has a huge scene. Germany, Axel does the Boogie-Woogie reunion, I think it's called. And there's all over Europe now. And Switzerland, especially these boogie festivals popping up, which I don't find that we have that in England. So weirdly, you see that from outside, but from the inside, I don't feel as much boogie happening here. There's a great Spanish player called Luis Coloma, again, one of the greatest boogie players. And I went and did his festival in Terrazza, just outside of Barcelona, in January. And all these boogie players coming from all over Europe. It's quite amazing, really. It's also, what's even more amazing is that we're managing to fill 2 hours by only playing 3 chords. That's the other amazing.
And well, that's a real education. Thank you, Tom. And going back to the UK, I think Jools does have a lot to answer for, both for keeping Boogie-Woogie at the forefront, but also for not answering our emails, because that rotten bugger needs to come on this show as well, and he just doesn't respond to our emails. It's like he's popular or something.
So Tom, tell us, you're a young man, you're getting into Boogie-Woogie piano, you're influenced by Jools Holland, you think, wow, I could be a leader of a band, playing the piano. How do we go from that young man through your teen years to becoming a professional musician? What was that transition? What did that look like for you?
Well, I've never had any idea of doing anything else other than playing the piano. I don't think I'm very good at anything else bar playing the piano. So it was always this has to be it. So age 13, my dad was putting an alarm. He's an alarm engineer. Was fitting an alarm in a brand new wine bar in a little village just down the road. And on the same day he was fitting the alarm, they brought in a grand piano. And he said, "Oh, have you got somebody to play the piano?" And they said, "No, not really. We're looking for people. Do you know anyone?" He said, "Well, my lad, he's only 13, but he's all right. He can knock a tune out, of a piano." So now I didn't sing at this point. I just played. So age 13, I had a residency in Kershaw's Wine Bar in a little place called Nantwich. And I wasn't old enough to be in there on my own. It was kind of almost like a nightclub type bar as well. It was, so I wasn't old enough to be in there. So every Sunday, my mum used to go and sit and have a Sunday roast and a glass of wine and read the paper, whilst I sat and played the piano for 3 or 4 hours in this little bar. Now, it's a great education because you have to learn to play the piano for 3 to 4 hours. You've got to learn new material. You've got to keep it interesting. Also, I was being paid £30. I was the best paid 13-year-old in the county. And that quickly gave me a taste of, okay, you can earn money doing this. I don't have to get a paper round. I can go play the piano for money. Then, of course, you sort of get people on the sort of local scene kind of realize that you can play a bit. So I got in with a guy called Al Dean, local musician that's been round in sort of Crewe and Nantwich forever, and he was playing all the pubs. And all of a sudden you start doing the pub gigs, and then all of a sudden your £30 goes to £50. It's like, oh, this is we're getting somewhere now. And so I was doing 3 or 4, and let's be realistic, kind of rubbish pub gigs a week. But that's a great education because you're playing to people that really don't want you to be in their pub making a noise. So you learn a lot of things that you need to learn. You grow up quite quickly. And so that probably then took me sort of 14, 15, 16, 17. I was doing all these pub gigs, 3 or 4 a week. And then, and obviously at the time I was still having piano lessons. I was at school and at college still learning piano. And I've always read music, but the thing that I was sort of stronger at was playing by ear and improvising and my first ever piano teacher, actually, it was classical piano. And after the first few lessons, she said to my mum, she says, "I can't teach him." She says, "It's like he makes it up as he goes along," which is great because that's clearly an indication. Moved to jazz, so I did all my jazz grades. So even though I can do all the swing and the jazz stuff, it was always kind of rock and roll and blues and boogie that was my passion, really. And then I got into LIPA, which is the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts in Liverpool, Paul McCartney's school. The story goes that he was watching Fame, the musical Fame, and he said, England needs a Fame school. And the idea was that it would be musicians, singers, actors, dancers, whatever, all under one roof. And I remember one masterclass we had with Sir Paul that he said he always had this idea that you would walk down the corridors there and all of a sudden someone would burst out into song and then someone would start dancing and then someone would harmonise and all of a sudden you've got this musical happening in front of your eyes. I hate to shatter the illusion, but it wasn't quite like that. So I went to LIPA aged 18 with a plan to do my degree. So it was the plan was that it was a 3-year thing, but I ended up just getting offered too much work that I left after 1 year.
Yeah, okay. So very interesting. And that comment you made about like learning as you were going, getting an education, obviously very important to you. And then that comment you made about your teacher saying, well, I'm not going to teach him because he's making it up as he goes along. And that touches on something that we were keen to ask you about, which is, you're playing jazz, blues, boogie styles in your music. What's your approach to improvisation? How do you develop a solo? What do you think about, and how did you learn that skill of improvisation as you were coming up through the ranks?
The reality is, I don't know, and I don't think I can sort of give you that technical thing of what I did. I presume, I'm 31 now, so sort of, I was sort of learning officially through the books and the scales and all that when I was, 10 to 15, whatever. So it's been a while since I've actually sat down and consciously thought of what I am actually learning. But I presume in order to have passed the exams that I passed, that I must have learned all the grades and done all the theory and all the scales and that sort of stuff. So I guess there's a fundamental knowledge that you have to have the scales in order to kind of know what works. But I've always had little things in my head that teachers have told me, like, you're only half a note away from a right note. So it doesn't matter if you play something and it kind of doesn't sound right, just go to the next one and you'll be fine. So I've always kind of played with the idea of just play and see and see what happens. And you're going to make mistakes. And that's what all those gigs when I was 13 to, even till you're 25 are great for, that you're learning, you're playing, you're making mistakes, and that's okay because you just, you learn what works and what doesn't work. And of course, I think I've caught, for whatever we agree is good and bad about it, I've caught the era where everything's on YouTube and everything's online, and you can go and type in, teach me blues licks in C, and once you've got that, you can then go and adapt it, and you learn it on gigs. And still, I do that now. I watch people on YouTube, on Instagram, and think, oh, what are they playing? That's cool. So I try and look at what they're playing. Now, I'm not going to go away and copy that, but I'm going to try and put that into my vocabulary. That means that when I go onto a gig, you're not really going to probably remember what they actually played, but you remember something similar. And then you add your own little blues line in as well. And all of a sudden you're creating your own style, and you're coming up with see, everything's not new, but you're coming up with your own interpretations of stuff and trying to create your own style, really. So I think when I'm soloing, there's an element of I've got some knowledge, but also I've got some tricks that I've learned, and I've got a couple of standard sort of boogie, bluesy licks that I've learned and picked up over the years, that you try and meld them all together, and hopefully you end up sounding like Tom, and you come up with your own thing, really.
And Tom, you mentioned about learning for and on gigs. I mean, what was the first gig you played? And I want to move into sort of your touring experiences. What was the first gig you played? You went, okay, this is next level. Like, this is something now I'm looking at doing this as a full-time pursuit.
In terms of when I first thought, so leaving Lipper was a case where I'd kind of been offered two things that really turned my head. One of them was playing with a guy called Penny Thomas. He had a hit called Thinking About Your Love. I think it was the year I was born, actually, which I do like to remind him of. And that was just playing keyboards for him. Now, I'd never really thought about being someone's keyboard player or someone's piano player, because I'd always just kind of done my own thing. So this was a chance to play with a soul singer that had #1 hits, and I had to actually learn parts. So that was quite a different thing for me. And even since then, I've never really done that since. So maybe as much as that was an education, in a way, it was maybe an education that made me realise, actually, I don't want to do that. But at the time, I was getting offered a couple of dates with Kenny, and they were, I'm 18, and all of a sudden you're doing these gigs, Silverstone Racecourse for the Formula One Grand Prix, and there's big people, there's a lot of people there. So I was doing some stuff with Kenny, which was quite cool, and then I got offered a gig, and it was just a piano bar on a cruise. And they rang me and said, we need someone tomorrow. Are you free? And I was like, yeah, of course I'm free. I'm doing nothing. And they said, you need to know 300 songs. Do you know 300 songs? You need a repertoire of 300 so you don't repeat yourself and it's not boring. And I'm thinking in my head, I know 12 songs, but yeah, fine. I'll say I know 300, no problem. So I said yes, and I flew out to Barbados or something. And all of a sudden you're going, 18 years old, they're flying me to Barbados. They're paying me. This is the best gig ever. So, and I'm very white and very ginger. So I stocked up on the Factor 50 and flew myself out to Barbados, jumped on the ship, and quickly realised I was way out of my depth in terms of, I blagged this gig and I really didn't know enough songs. So I thought, well, if I play all of me, that's 3 minutes. And then if I sing all of me, that's another 3 minutes. And then if I play all of me again, old Tommy Boy's a genius. We've turned all of me into a 10-minute thing here. So I started to sing. And listen, I really couldn't sing, and now sort of 12, 13 years later, I always wonder if my voice is stronger than my piano playing, which is quite interesting, that certainly had no formal training with my voice or anything. And I literally started to sing on that ship to waste time. And P&O Cruises, if you're listening, I apologise profusely. And so I did that for a while. And so I think that was probably the point where I sort of went, okay, you can make a living out of this. You can actually do something. You can travel the world. You can do the thing you love doing. And it can actually be a job.
Great. And so, I mean, that's obviously led to a lot of touring experiences since. So let's just talk about the touring aspects. What are the big learnings? And I mean, unless I've got it wrong, I think you've done Montreux at one stage. Have you been to Glastonbury?
Yeah, done Glastonbury a few times. Admittedly, the car park stage, but I've done Glastonbury a few times. I've done Montreux. So coming out of Lippo, so sort of 18, I did a bit on the ships. I didn't like doing the piano bar thing. It wasn't for me, so I did it for a few weeks and then kind of and left that. But then I started to do my gigs sort of picked up a bit in terms of fee, I guess. All of a sudden then the fee sort of picked up, and I wasn't doing the local pub gigs in Crewe. I got into the fancy wine bars in Manchester, and I was this is exciting. So I did that for a while, and then all of a sudden I thought, you know what, if I don't stop this or I don't make a change, I'll get stuck. So I made a real sort of bold, and you look back now and I think actually that was quite a big, bold decision, especially at sort of age 20, to sort of make. I went, I need to stop doing gigs for that amount of money where I'm playing in a bar. And it wasn't because I felt I was better than that. I just felt, I know I can do something a bit more than this. So I said to the agent, greatest respect, after that run of gigs in a couple of months when it's over, I'm going to stop. So, and I knew then that for those sort of 6-month turnaround period or whatever, I wasn't going to have any work. And that kind of happened. There was a few months where I didn't get any gigs, and I was like, have I really made a big mistake here? Or, but I didn't have a house. There was no pressure to earn money. So it allowed me to make those decisions and make those changes. So then I thought, well, okay, I need to profile build. So there's always gigs you do for money. There's always gigs that you do because you want to do them. There's always gigs that you do as a profile build. And the reality is the profile builds are never the big payers. But the idea is that you grow your profile, therefore your fee then goes up in other departments, and hopefully it all evens out in the end. That's always kind of how I've thought about it in my head. So I thought I need to do some profile build gigs. And then I did a gig at the 100 Club on Oxford Street in London, world famous 100 Club. And it was supporting a harmonica player called Paul Lamb. Great harp player. And it was like this blues night, and they put a couple of blues bands on, and great. So I did that gig. Now, the day before that gig, I got asked if I would put the band in for a Bollywood film for a scene where they're in Paris, okay? But they were filming it at the 606 Club in London. So they asked me to put a band in. So I put the band in for this, and honestly, I'd sat at the piano for 14 hours that day on this shoot. And when I say we're in that film for 3 seconds, I might even be sort of being generous with the 3 there. It could have been 2, okay? What a complete waste of everyone's time. But anyway, so I did the Bollywood film. Then the day after, we're at the 100 Club. Now, the drummer who came with me that on the film shoot and then did the gig with me, he said, I'd like to bring a mate of mine along. He's a harmonica player, so he'll love the gig. He'll love this Paul Lamb. Would you mind? Yeah, of course, bring him. So anyway, this guy came, and this guy was in a band called CC Smugglers. Now, I hadn't heard of CC Smugglers. All I know is they were signed to LPO. They were signed to the Leighton Pope organisation, who also had Michael Bublé. They had Billy Ocean. They had Bryan Adams. They had some real big names, and they got CC Smugglers as one of their sort of development smaller acts. Now, as time progresses, you sort of learn that these festivals say, we want Michael Bublé, and the agent says, yeah, you can have Bublé, but you've got to have CC Smugglers as well. Now, that's clever. It gives them Bublé, but also raises the profile of the smaller acts. Perfect. So anyway, this guy came called Richie, who was the lead singer of CC Smugglers. And it turned out they were then going on tour a few weeks later. And he said, oh, you'd be a great support for us on tour. Would you want to do it? And this is perfect. This is that opportunity of going out on tour, not really earning any money, but profile building that I'd been after. So I said yes to going on tour with Smugglers. Anyway, halfway through the tour, something happened and their keyboard player dropped out. But because I'd done sort of 5 or 6 nights now, kind of knew all the stuff, and I could just jump in, no problem. So I ended up jumping in, just depping for the band for a few nights on the tour. Anyway, one thing led to another. I ended up joining the band on a permanent basis. And we had the most amazing sort of 3 or 4 years. The band had been going before me and they went on after me. But for the 3 or 4 years that I joined the band, it was amazing. We did Montreux. Every summer we did about 40 European festivals. I mean, all over Europe. There was one time at Montreux, we sat on the balcony at the Claude Nobbs, the guy that created Montreux. His house up in the mountains in Montreux is now effectively by his son been turned into a museum. And we got a private tour of the house, and we sat on the balcony next to Herbie Hancock having dinner, and we got to go and see where Freddie Mercury landed his helicopter on the grass, and I mean, just amazing stuff. So we did that, and we did a couple of original tunes that got playlisted by Radio 2. We did North Sea. We did Smugglers supported Springsteen in Belgium to 80,000 people. Property Festival in England to 20,000. I mean, just the most amazing experiences. So that was an amazing few years with the Smuggler Boys.
Did that give you a love of touring or a dislike for touring, or maybe some great survival skills for touring around? I see you still tour now. I'd be really interested in your thoughts and perspectives on it.
Loved it. And it was a different thing to what I'm doing now, because I was sort of part of a band. So like now it's the project's Tom Seals, and that's because the only constant in that project is me. All my other musicians, they're so good, they're playing with other people, that I've always wanted 2 or 3 people in each position, which meant I don't have to turn gigs down. But at that time when I was with Smugglers, I was just a keyboard player, so the dynamic was very different to the way I tour now. But I loved it, and it was in a big van. Again, it's not the way I tour now, but with Smugglers, it was in the big white transit van, and we had an Xbox in the back, and we'd have someone driving, and we'd be sitting playing on the Xbox and driving through Europe, and you were with your best mates. What an amazing thing, early 20s, to be traveling all around Europe in the back of a van, playing amazing gigs to 20,000 people, just turning up, having a laugh. But yeah, just funny experiences. I remember we were in Hungary, and it was beyond hot. It was 45 degrees. It was absolutely crazy. And Richie, the lead singer guy, we nipped into this supermarket, and Rich always liked to eat really weird things, I remember, on tour. He was always eating odd stuff. And we ended up in this really sort of strange supermarket, and Richie brought a glass bottle of like pickled herring or some ridiculous fish that I don't realise people eat that anyway, let alone when it's 45 degrees in Hungary. Anyway, he gets in the van, he slips, he smashes the glass bottle, and all this pickled herring juice goes everywhere in the carpeted thing of the van. So that was a fun few days of the smell in that van. So anyway, yeah. Some amazing experiences that I really, really wouldn't change, and I'm sure, and I'll remember them forever, But yeah, I loved being on the road, seeing the different places, and because you've got the days. Normally, yeah, you might have a sound check in the afternoon, but you've got the days to do something cool, and you know what, you realise just how fortunate you are to be travelling around with your best mates, visiting all these countries, doing amazing gigs, coming back with a bit of cash. It was amazing.
Yeah, and having wonderful experiences on the way. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Tom. I'm interested also, you just listening to you tell some of these stories, you certainly strike me as someone who doesn't let the grass grow under your feet. You're quite proactive with your career and making things happen, which has obviously been one of the secrets to your success. COVID was very tricky for everyone in the music industry, and you did some really great work, during COVID, which and here's me advertising your YouTube channel. Please, listeners and viewers, check out Tom's work he did during COVID on YouTube. It is really interesting. Some great stuff there. Some great tunes you put together. I'm interested in your perspective on that. So, what approach you took, how you arrived at what you did, and were there any particular highlights for you or some favourite pieces you put together during that time?
Yeah. So what we did in COVID has really, almost sounds a bit dramatic, but changed my life, really. It really sort of took me down a completely different avenue. So I'd always had an idea, and it's funny that you ask about the Desert Island tunes, because I have always had, obviously we have the show here, Desert Island Discs, have been a long-standing BBC thing. And I've always had this thing of, why don't the BBC have a live show, a live version of Desert Island Discs? So I wanted to film a pilot of TV show where I would interview celebrity guests about their favourite songs, and then we would take the songs with my band and we'd make them jazzy and bluesy, and we'd change them and we'd do our own interpretations. So March 2020 we were actually meant to film a pilot for a TV show, which of course the world stopped in March 2020. Now, I told you earlier, one of the gigs I do is the guest entertainer thing on ships. So I fly out, join a ship, perform a night in the theatre with their band on board, and then fly home. So I was meant to be in South America for about 5 days, 5 or 6 days. I was meant to be on the ship. So I went out to South America, and I ended up being on that ship for about 7 weeks, because all the ports kept closing and nowhere would let us get in to fly home, and we were those scary cruise ship passengers that nobody wanted and everyone hated us, and we weren't allowed to fly. Okay. So anyway, I eventually got home, and I was living with a girl at the time called Gemma. Well, I say at the time, I presume her name is still Gemma. I don't know. And it turns out when you stop traveling the world and earning a bit of money and doing all these places, performing at Ronnie Scott's and Dubai Opera House and Glastonbury, and so it turns out when all that stops and you get home and you have to live in a room with each other a few weeks, turns out you can't stand each other. But who'd have thought it? That's another story. So I was going to film the pilot. Okay, she'll never listen to this. It's fine. Anyway, she's here now on the other line.
It's funny you should say that. Now, are you there, Gemma? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, well, that would be a turn up for the books. Anyway, so I was going to film this pilot of a TV show. Obviously, couldn't happen. So I've got a mate of mine who runs a production company that he's got the big outside broadcast van. So the big van where he's kitted it all out in the middle with all the screens and it's all the desks and whatever. And he can go and do a 6-camera outside broadcast anywhere in the world as long as he can plug it in. And he was doing this for TV shows like The Great British Bake Off, Strictly Come Dancing. He was doing some really high-end, amazing stuff. Now, obviously, for me to pay for that would cost a fortune. Okay. Now, we get to COVID, and after a month of being at home and everyone's bored, all my band was like, Tom, we're so bored. Like, there must be something we can do. And my mate, Gunners, who owns his name's John Gunstone, we all call him Gunners. My mate's got this production company, and he's also not working and terribly bored. So we said, I wonder if we could do a live stream from somewhere. They have to be outside because of all the COVID regulations. I wonder if we could do it outside. So in the end, what we decided to do is we decided to set up my band in my mum's back garden. Now, my mum doesn't have necessarily a big back garden, but there's enough space. So it was at the time where you were only allowed 6 people in the garden. Okay, so what we did is we put the rhythm section, the piano, bass, guitar and drums at the back of my mum's house with 5 cameras being operated by 2 people. So that's my 6, okay? Now, if I want the horn section, which I do, I love big band, we know this. If we want the horn section, the trumpet, the trombone, the saxophones, where do we put them? So what we did is we put them at the front of my mum's house, because that's technically a different garden. So they were at the front with their own camera and their own monitors and everything. And I, through Zoom, through Skype and Zoom and whatever, I had celebrity guests on. Now, I couldn't see them, but I could hear them in my ears. And we did a Desert Island Discs type show live in Mum's back garden with a live band with the most amazing sort of camera angles and sound recordings, and it was ridiculously over the top for what it was. But first week, 90 people watched. That's it, 90. We had Matt Lucas, who's a British comedian, on the show, did a show, Little Britain. And I knew Matt from something, so we had Matt on the show. Now, by week 6, we had Katie Tunstall, singer-songwriter Katie. She was in LA, and I was in Crewe. And 250,000 people watched this thing by week 6. So the progression in 6 weeks was quite ridiculous, really. And then we came to do week 7, and then I got offered a 13-week series on Sky. So Sky is obviously our big sort of network here in the UK. And I got offered a 13-week series on one of the music channels, which we then did. So we moved it away from Mum's Garden. We went into a proper studio, and we filmed 13 episodes with 13 celebrity guests. I wanted all manner of people. I didn't just want musicians. I wanted actors, politicians, sports people, a real sort of varied mix of people, which I was interested to know. You know, let's take a politician, for example. They're just about to go in and do a big talk, or they're about to do Prime Minister's questions, or whatever it is. Are they psyching themselves up listening to music before they go in? And just things like that I just thought was quite interesting. And we had some amazing guests. I'm just trying to think of people from all around the world who they would know. Kaiser Chiefs, Noddy Holder from the rock band Slade,
wow.
greatest voice in rock and roll.
Yeah.
Some real amazing guests. Kenny Dalglish, a Liverpool football legend, one of my footballing heroes. David Coulthard, the Formula One driver. Diane Abbott, the first black female politician to have got into the House. You know, some real cool people. So we did that show, and then off the back of that, I got a touring deal with Live Nation. So we did a couple of dates with them, world's biggest promoters. We released the album through a subsidiary, and it got released through Universal Records. And then my gigs changed. So that really changed things, because all of a sudden, yes, I was doing the sort of Ronnie Scotts and the sort of Birdland, the sort of jazz gigs I was getting already. But this really opened me up into a more commercial part of the UK, where we got into theatres. And good, you know, we started doing a live version of that show. So that show was called Tom Seals Presents. So the show would be called Tom Seals Presents ... Noddy Holder, or whoever the guest was. And the first ever show we did, I just wanted to do it with 100 people, just to try the format, see if I could present. Because I'm not, you know, all of a sudden I found myself being in lockdown TV presenter I'd never done it before, but I had to learn quickly. So the first ever show we did was with Noddy at the Pizza Express Jazz Club in Underground in Soho in London. And there was 100 people there. And we quickly realised that it worked, and I could do it, and great. So then the shows quickly went up and up and up. And the highest one we've done is about 1,500 seater theatre, with a great comedian called James Acaster. He has a Netflix special, you might have seen it. So we had James on the show. So it really kind of changed everything, because then it changed the way I work, because all of a sudden I've just been a musician that's like most musicians, and you take anything and everything. If you're free, you take the gig. It's just the way it works. Now, I always wanted to get to a stage where I could plan my work in almost like a touring period way. So I'll go, okay, well, April for 6 weeks, I'm going to go on tour. And then for those few weeks, we do this. And the year becomes a bit more strategic. And that's for the last 2 years, kind of the way I've been working now, that we've been thinking about it a bit more cleverly. Obviously, one-off stuff's always going to come in. Like in a few weeks, I'm playing the Blue Note in Milan. You know, the Blue Note, the biggest, most prestigious jazz brand in the world, which is amazing. I've always wanted to play the Blue Note, so great. But that will just be a one-off. Whereas now, when I'm in England, we try and make sure we're thinking a bit more strategically. We try and tour a bit more effectively, and try and create a bit more of a demand. You know, hopefully they go, oh, we've not seen Tom Seals do anything in Manchester for a year, but Tom's coming back. Let's go. So hopefully there's a bit more of that. So it really has changed the way that I work.
No, that's brilliant, Tom. And I have to ask you, across all those shows, aside from those amazing guests, us Australians know pretty much everyone you mentioned there, particularly, I'm a massive Slade fan, so Noddy Holder alone would make my day. And I imagine he's quite the wit as well. Like, I imagine he's great for a laugh in different junctures. But I'm interested, what were the desert island disc themes that came out for you? Because I know the show was about three songs that inspired them. Did you see any themes come out across all of those?
I think so. I'd always ask the guests, give me something with a story, because then it opens up a conversation, and that's obviously great. I think there was always an element of the songs sort of chaptering their life. There was always one that reminded them of being at home as a kid, and their dad used to sing this, or whatever. And it's funny you mention about Noddy, because actually out of all of the guests, that Noddy has become the one that I've really bonded with the most, which is quite amazing, really. That Nod's nearly 80 years old, and there's nearly a 50-year gap between us, but every 2 or 3 weeks for the last 18 months we've gone out for dinner. Wow. And just having this time with such a legend that shares the stories is amazing. So now we've been doing that show, which was meant to be a one-off. I think we've done it maybe 11 or 12 times now, and that show is developing every time, because yes, some of the music choices stay the same, and Nod tells the story of how he was at the record label, and they said, we're bringing this guy in to sing a few songs. His name's Stevie Wonder. You won't have heard of him, but anyway, here's Stevie Wonder. And then we play the Stevie song. So there's always nice stories, which I know, but every show we get something more, and there's always something more to talk about, and something different coming out of it, which is amazing. But the cool thing for me is that it's made me sing songs that I never would have thought to sing, because people are picking songs that they truly just love. And what's so nice to see is their emotion, because what we do is we sit the guest in the sort of curve of the grand piano. So, and we put the band around them in a sort of half moon, that they're having their favourite songs, which remind them of a childhood memory or whatever the thing is. They're having them performed by an incredible band, and I'm not even saying that just about myself. I mean, the musicians around me, my bass player at the minute, Roger Innes, he was with Shaka Khan, Ruby Turner. He's now musical director for Kiefer Sutherland. My guitarist, Bjorn, did 2 world tours with Bruno Mars. He's with Simply Red. And, the caliber of musicianship. The drummer was with the BBC Concert Orchestra. The musicianship is great. Yeah. And these guests are having their favourite songs performed by a great band around them. And more often than not, they're so emotional because of it, which is amazing. And it adds so much to the show, and it's really cool. It's a really nice feeling to bring something to these people that ultimately I'm a fan of, because I wouldn't have asked them to do the show if I didn't sort of resonate with them, or I didn't like them, or I didn't know who they were. So for me, if I'm totally honest, it's been a great excuse. We've done nearly 53, 54 shows, I think now, that they're 53 and 54 people that I just want to meet.
Yes.
That I'm a fan of, and I just get to spend a few hours in the company of someone that I admire. And that
sounds familiar. It sounds familiar.
Yeah. I wonder why that...
No, Tom, that's amazing. And so I think, even though it's a marginally earlier than we'd usually ask in the show, we've got to do your Desert Island disc. So throw the 5 discs at us that you couldn't live without. Sadly, I'm not going to even attempt to play them for you, but still love your thoughts.
Oh, I'm off. Thanks. Nice chatting to you, fellas. See you later. It's so tricky. How do you pick 5, And the thing is that these probably... you would, as we were saying earlier, people kind of coin me as the Boogie-Woogie pianist, but that's not really what I would listen to. So it's impossible. If you ask me tomorrow, I'm sure it'd be a different 5, except the first one. So the first one, Billy Joel, my sort of main, my sort of piano playing wife, Jools Holland, of course. But I mean, in terms of singer-songwriter, written the most beautiful songs, Billy is my number one. So there's, again, it's hard to narrow it down between 2. There's The Stranger, one of the greatest albums, in my opinion, ever written. Every song is just great. I've actually done a show called Tom Seals Sings The Stranger, where I do the whole album top to bottom, just because I love every song on it. But it doesn't have New York State of Mind on, which, of course, is the greatest song ever written. So that sways me more towards the Live at Shea Stadium album. And all live albums for me always have that bit more energy and, a bit more something about them. So I would say either The Stranger or Live at Shea Stadium with Billy. Number 2, Ray Charles. How can you not pick Ray? Legend. Genius Sings the Blues, I think, is my go-to Ray album. Number 3, Carole King. again, similar to The Stranger, really, where every song is just beautifully written and beautifully sung. Tapestry. I think every song on that album is just genius. Number 4, going back to the sort of big band roots, Paul Carrack. An album called Another Side of Paul Carrack, which he did with the SWR Big Band. Obviously, Paul was in Squeeze, who we quickly, by knowing of Jools Holland, Squeeze became one of my favourite bands. And then Paul Carrack was in Squeeze. He replaced Jools Holland in that band. And what I think is so cool about Paul Carrack is that I was trying to get him as a guest on my show because I'm such a fan of him, and I managed to get an email address for him. Someone passed me his email, and I sent him this email and fully expected him never to reply, or at least pass me on to the management or something. And he just wrote back really sort of normally, which is just so amazing for someone that's had so many hits and done so much. He just wrote back saying, "Tom, great to hear from you. Yeah, would love to do the show. Can't at the minute because I'm on tour, but yeah, we'll definitely sort it out. By the way, I think checking out your website and watching what you do and gave me some nice words about what I do." He said, "I think you'd really enjoy my new album." Now, this is a man that really doesn't need to be doing any self-promotion because I'm sure this album will do just fine. And he didn't say, "Oh, by the way, it's coming out on October the 1st. You can pre-order it on the, He said, "Tom, I think you'd really enjoy my album. Anyway, here's a link to it on Dropbox. Let me know what you think."
Nice.
And sent me his new album. And I was just like, that's a real muso. Because he actually, he cares about the music. It's not a commercial sell. He just cares. He loves music and he wants another muso that he knows will enjoy it to enjoy it. So that made me love Paul Carrack even more.
Yeah.
And then the 5th one is one of my favourite bands at the minute called Lawrence. Do you know Lawrence?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we were talking about it the other day. Yes,
We've just been talking about it. We've actually made approaches to Clyde. We'd love to have Clyde on the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Breakfast was the first thing I'd heard of theirs. It was, I think, 2017, 2018. And they did that tune, Do You Want to Do Nothing With Me, which is just so good. But yeah, they're amazing, aren't they? Brother and sister duo from New York. They're
incredible.
Yeah, we absolutely love them. So we'll put those albums up on our links to our show.
And I think you're underselling yourself too, Tom. I think you only did 4. I think you've still got one up your sleeve.
No, that's fine. Billy Ray, Carole King, Paul Carrack,
Oh,
Lawrence.
yes, and then Lawrence. I apologise. See, someone that sticks to his guns. We quite often have guests that will give us 12 in the top 5.
I'm just imagining doing my tax returns with those counting skills.
Well, we are from Australia, mate. So
That's right. We're convicts.
We're an ex-penal colony. We're not real bright. We're good at stealing bread. That's our main claim to fame.
Well, you said it, boy. It's not me.
So we're fascinated to know, Tom, what your favourite digital pianos would be to use when you're playing, various gigs and on tour, but maybe also your favourite acoustic pianos to play as well.
Well, as an endorser of Yamaha, of course. But the truth is, I am endorsed by Yamaha, and I have such an amazing support from them, and that's really not just me saying that. They will send me a grand piano anywhere in the world if we need it.
Wow.
If we deem that the gig is big enough and worth that effort, then Yamaha are amazing. They will send me a piano. They sent me the Yamaha CP88 when that first came out, and I've never really got on with Nords and things with too many buttons. They've never really interested me, because all I've wanted is a great piano sound with a great feel that feels like a real piano. I want it to replicate as close as we can to real piano. And for a few years, I was playing Roland. I had the RD800 and the RD2000s. Again, it was always just piano driven, and they were great, and the keys felt nice and whatever. And then Yamaha sent me the CP88, and it really, for me, you're not getting anything better in terms of a genuine piano feel. I love playing that, and actually the electric piano on that is amazing as well. But in terms of electric piano sounds, I also, on a sort of electric piano side, I'm endorsed by Korg. And Korg have just sent me the SV2. Do you know the SV2?
Absolutely, yeah.
With the little amp in it, which is so out of my, it's out of my realms really, because I've never been interested in sort of messing and playing with things like that. But this has got me actually interested in playing with all those sounds and trying to create new things. And it kind of reminds me of the Muse. Remember the Feeling Good sound that Muse got on that Feeling Good record? Sounds like that to me. So I've been playing with that. So I've been sort of having my acoustic grand piano on stage, and then having the SV2 on the side, because I do in my set I play When You Get Back, John Cleary, and I like sort of using the electric piano sound on it. So I think the SV2 has been perfect for that. And the legs on that piano are amazing because they've got the wooden legs. Makes it look like it's like a piece of furniture. It's not like a keyboard stand. It's amazing. And in terms of real pianos, nothing's going to beat Steinway for me, really. Probably shouldn't say that with my Yamaha connections, but that's the truth. Steinway are amazing, and I did the Steinway 2 Pianos Festival in London a few years ago. And actually, I don't. He may have been a guest, but if he hasn't, this guy definitely should be a guest on the show. Was the guy I did the Steinway show with. They booked me and they said, you can ring whoever you want to do the second piano. So he's one of my favourite piano players, and he also has the best name in show business, which helps. His name is Mo Pleasure. Oh, what a great name.
Yeah,
so
it's a great name.
So I joked on the night that he was Mo Pleasure and I was No Pleasure. But Mo, I'm sure you know, Mo actually played bass for Ray Charles. He was in the Ray Charles Orchestra. And he was then musical director for Earth, Wind and Fire. He was then keyboard player for Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, That's MD right. for Bette Midler. I mean, this guy's done, and at the minute, actually, this week he's doing The Voice in America. He's playing keyboards on The Voice. But anyway, I'll introduce you. So coming soon, everybody, exclusive. You hear it here first. Keyboard Chronicles will have Mo Pleasure on very soon. But anyway, so we did the show with Mo, and that was two pianos on stage, 2 Steinways, worth more than the house, and they're just a piece of art. You move your hand up the piano, and it plays itself. It does what you want it to do. And then, funnily enough, there's a mate of mine who, it was quite funny. I'd met him about maybe 10 years ago. Must have been one that cruise I told you about when I was 18. Okay, I met this guy. Don't really remember meeting him if I'm totally honest. And he must have took my number, because 10 years later I get this phone call. He's totally randomly out of nowhere. I answer the phone. He says, "Hello." He says, "You won't remember me, but we met on this ship and I took your number. I've got you in my phone as Tom Piano." He said, "Do you still play the piano?" And I said, Yeah, I do, yeah. He says, "What are you doing now?" It was like 6 o'clock at night. "What are you doing now?" I was like, "Well, nothing really, just about to have my dinner." "Why?" He says, "Oh, well, we've just checked into the Corinthia Hotel, big posh hotel on Whitehall in London, and we've just got to our suite, and there's a piano here. Would you come and play it for us?" I'll pay you. Would you come and play it?" And I'm thinking, well, that's 2 hours away on the train for me. I don't really know who this guy is, but okay. So I ring my management. I said, what do you reckon about this? And my manager at the time said, "Look, just go. If you get there and it feels a bit weird, just leave. Just go, because you never know." Anyway, long story, the gig was fine, and I've ended up doing a few more gigs for him since. But he bought, and I believe there's only 2 in the UK. He bought the Steinway Black Diamond piano, which is where the leg sort of comes into a point and there's a real diamond in the leg, and then it goes back out. And I actually did a gig at his house on New Year's Eve on the Black Diamond. And
he sounds like he'd be a poor payer, Tom. I don't know why you do these gigs.
He was haggling. Yeah, he was haggling over the 50 quid train journey. He wasn't happy about that. But yeah, so I got to play the Black Diamond, which is, when people say, when people refer to a steak as it cutting through like butter, it was so smooth. This was the butter of pianos. It was quite incredible.
Yeah, it was the aged Wagyu.
Exactly.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So something we love to ask all our guests, Tom, is can you relate a memorable train wreck that may have happened to you while playing?
Yeah, there's 2. One that comes to mind is mechanical, and one is technical. So the mechanical one is, I was doing a gig at Uttoxeter Racecourse in England, and it was the I think the festival was called the Acoustic Festival of Great Britain. Quite a big stage. It was one of the first gigs I'd done not as Smugglers, as Tom Seals. It was one of the first sort of big gigs, big race course, thousands of people, and it wasn't a piano. It wasn't a decent piano. So even if now I'm doing a festival gig or a theatre gig where we don't have a real grand piano, at least I'll use my Yamaha in a shell, in a grand piano shell. So at least it looks half decent. It looks like we've got a grand piano on stage. But this gig, for whatever reason, I didn't have a shell and I just had like a stage piano, so almost like a keyboard. Now, I'm excited. I'm going for it. I'm giving it plenty of beans. And I'm smacking the right hand, doing, giving it all a boogie. And the cross stand just collapses. It literally just collapses on the floor. Piano hits the ground. So I thought, well, what do you do? So I lay on the ground and carried on playing. I thought that's the only way of dealing with this. And then at the end, and then just passed it over to a guitar solo or whatever. And then all the crew ran on and we managed to put it on. But I completely broke the stand. And we ended up just putting it on a like I don't know, like a storage box for all the mic stands or something. We just put it on that and ploughed on. And then so that visually was a disaster, but funny because we made a bit of a joke out of it. And then the second one it's happened a few times. And so depending on the gig, and especially when we do the Tom Seals Present shows, especially for the Sky show, we did 13 episodes and we had to learn 3 songs per episode for it. So that's 39 tunes that we recorded in a couple of days, which is a lot. And I didn't have them all in my head. I can remember some stuff, but I can't remember the lyrics to 39 songs that I don't really know. So we have iPads on the piano. Just, and obviously I'm trying not to sort of stare at the iPad for that thing, but it's kind of there as a reference and I kind of glance at it. And I remember turning up to do a gig and it was a big festival somewhere and we were definitely in Europe somewhere. Big gig, and we were putting in some new tunes that I really wanted to run. It wasn't a Tom Seals Present show, it was just a gig. But we were doing some new stuff that I didn't really know, so I had the iPad there as a security blanket. And on the flight there, for whatever reason, the iPad must have been open or something, I don't know, and it died. And, so that's but no one really would have known except me just having this panic throughout the whole gig that my iPad's on 1%. And then obviously it died, and I'm trying to sing songs where I don't know the words, so I'm making it up, and yeah, bit of a disaster, but no one would have known.
No, that's a sign of a true professional, Tom. Yeah, great work.
Yeah, and also hopefully they didn't speak English anyway, so we could have been saying anything.
That's right. That's exactly right. So Tom, we've come getting close to the end. We like to wrap up with what's our quick fire 10. So 10 short and sharp questions. Really appreciate your answers. I'll kick off with the first album you ever heard.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, but it must have been something big band. I would have thought it would have been a Glenn Miller type thing.
Cool. What's your most important pre-gig ritual?
Making sure my iPad's charged. Which is actually probably the truth.
Yeah, that's great. If you hadn't been a musician, Tom, what do you think your career choice would have been?
A drummer.
No, well done. That's first time that's been given as an answer. Good job.
Have you ever used the transpose button?
Yes. I hate to admit it, but I have. Yeah. No one's playing an F sharp, are they? Come on, let's be realistic.
No, I agree with that statement. Favourite gig you've ever done, if that's at all possible, given the variety of what you do?
Probably the first time I played Ronnie Scott's. It was always my dream, because I've always been sort of rock and roll and boogie and not jazz. I never thought I'd get to play there. I'd always kind of written it off as a dream that would just never happen. And I've been every Christmas for 6 or 7 years now, and it's every time it's so special. The history of the people that have played there, just it's beyond pinch me stuff every time.
And we will link to one of the Ronnie Scott gigs. One of the ones I watched, Tom, I love how you threw the singer, and I apologise, I've forgotten his name. You threw him under the bus for having an iPad and claimed he was playing Candy Crush on it, not using it for lyrics. So I thought that was quite amusing. Sorry, over to you, Paul.
Yeah, no problem. A related question. What's the favourite city you've ever played?
Good question. Probably Montreux. I think the whole atmosphere of that place, A, it's beautiful. B, it's just, people are there for one purpose, and it's for that style of music. I was just walking around, a real, like, again, same as Ronnie's, pinching myself, going, I can't believe, I'm playing Montreux Jazz Festival. The place was beautiful. The gig was amazing, and I felt very fortunate that day to be there.
Yeah, hard to go past that. Name a song that you used to love, but you've played it to death, and you just grit your teeth while playing it now.
My instant thought, not that I play it very often, is Piano Man. It's just one of those songs that's like, oh, look, it's got to be. It's like that Sweet Caroline thing, isn't it? And Piano Man. It's just one of those terrible songs that should never be played ever again.
What's your favourite music documentary or movie?
Good question. The Ray Charles thing. I think Jamie Foxx in that was amazing. I'm just loving Ray Charles. It was like, and also that other film that is not a documentary. What's the film? Was it Green Book?
Oh yes, won the Academy Award.
Yeah,
yeah.
Again, that's an amazing film.
Yeah,
that's so. But documentary wise, not sure. What was the I don't know the name of it. What they won the alternative festival when Woodstock was on. That Summer of Soul. Was it Summer of Soul or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was Summer of Soul. I know the one you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. I didn't know anything about that. There was an alternative festival the same weekend, but it was like the black music sort of different thing to Woodstock, and it was amazing. I think that was such a great documentary.
No, great picks. Name one thing you'd like to see that'd make your life as a pianist easier.
Built-in iPad chargers.
Thank you.
No, I think what I would like, I think the one thing I'm trying to find at the moment is a piano shell that fits in my car. In terms of aesthetically on stage, there's a company called Dutch Grand which do them, but they only do it in one size. So that's at the moment. I'm like, I just wish someone would make a great, baby grand shell that would fit in my car, but they don't. So if anyone's listening, please get in touch.
Love it.
Business opportunity for someone there for sure.
Really?
And our last of our quickfire 10, what is your favourite thing to do when you're not doing music? Your favourite activity, hobby?
Well, I like the football. I go and watch the football quite a lot. So yesterday, at the time of recording, Liverpool, which is my sort of big team, they beat Man United 3-0. So that was a good day. And I've been away for a few weeks working away. I've not seen my family. So yesterday we came back and we all cooked and we all watched the football. And it's just, I think when you spend a lot of time away, you have to make those days. My sister's a school teacher, and she's all on a Sunday, she's always at home. And it's like, to her, she probably takes that for granted in a way that I'm like, no, all I want is that Sunday at home with all my family, eating some food, watching the football, and that's it. So I go and watch football. There's two teams really. My local team is Crewe, Alexandra, who are terrible, but they're my team, so you have to support them. But I have a nice relationship with them. When the Queen died a few years ago, and then when the King came in, all the English football games had to have God Save the King sung at the games. So Crewe rang me and asked me if I'd go and sing it on the pitch. And I said I would if we could get a piano on. Now, the groundsman did not like me after I suggested this. But Yamaha were amazing. Yamaha sent me a grand piano, and we got it on the pitch, and I got to sing God Save the King. And the Crewe song that they run out to is actually Blue Moon, the old standard Blue Moon, which I did a version of, and they play it at the ground and stuff. So, that's, again, for me, it's like, this is my team. I feel so proud of that. And only 3,000 people go and watch every Saturday, so it's not like it's a big game, big team, but it's my team, and I'm involved with it somehow. I'm never going to be able to play football for them, but at least I can be involved in the club, which I think is a real nice thing.
Absolutely, and it's never too late. You never know; you might get the call up.
Well, that's why I turn up every Saturday in my boots, but they don't seem to.
That's right. Look, Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. And speaking of through Neil, I'd say that's where your career is at the moment. I think you've kicked some major goals. I think you've got a lot more major goals still to kick, and I really appreciate you spending the time with us. It's a real privilege, particularly with someone with your presenting and TV experience. We are but amateurs, so we truly appreciate you taking the time.
Well, you're doing a great thing, fellas, so thanks for having me, and I look forward to seeing who's on next.
And there we have it. So we warned you might have some fun, and I'm hoping that was indeed the case. Paul, what a guy.
Yeah, well, my favourite part, I think, of the entire interview was when we asked him, what would you have done if you hadn't been a musician? And he said, be a drummer. And I was like nodding seriously. I went, hang on, that was a joke.
Look, and I love a drummer joke as much as no one respects drummers more than me, and they are so musicians, but you just can't get past a drummer joke in spite of how unauthentic and more stereotypical it is. It's still funny.
It's always funny. I mean, I have many drummers who are friends, and I'm lucky enough to work with some excellent drummers, but who cares? We're still going to pick on them. That's just how it's going to be. I'm sorry.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So no, that was a buzz. It was really good. And yeah, look, I'm still on a bit of a buzz. Just as an aside, Paul, having come back from the UK a month ago, I managed to fluke seeing Bruce Springsteen at Wembley Stadium. So this is where everyone will now tune out. They go, oh God, David's talking about Springsteen again. I'm actually wearing the tour T-shirt.
Oh yeah, I like it. Yeah, well, for those who don't know, David is, well, if there's a bigger Bruce Springsteen fan on the planet, I would love to meet them, because this is David's favourite artist, I think. And
he is.
So tell us a bit of what was the highlight of seeing him. I know you've seen him live many times, but
yeah, and it links to this podcast to some extent. And just as far as am I the biggest fan, I can tell you now that believe it or not, I'm not. The true fans are what are called spring nuts. And based on the wing nuts from, who's the wing nuts are fans of, I forgot what it is. Anyway, spring nuts, so these are the people that will, on a US tour, go around and see 40 dates on a US tour and so on. But yes, no, I'm a fan. So the thing that applies to this podcast is Bruce Springsteen's 74 years old. I'd seen a few videos before he hit the UK from his European tour, and early in the tour, I felt it was the whole band was struggling a bit, really starting to show their age. I mean, they're not young men and women anymore. Mm-hmm. By the time we got to Wembley, and this is where it relates to a podcast for all of us that play in bands, as you know, if you play a few gigs in a row, you start to get a bit of match fitness. And what I witnessed on that night in Wembley, and you can look it up, it's considered one of the highlights of his whole European tour, is a 74-year-old that has hit match fitness and played for 3 hours and 15 minutes without a break, as did the whole band. And particularly, speaking of drummers, Max Weinberg played for 3 hours and 15 minutes without a break. Mm-hmm. And he's in his 70s. I cannot recommend, whether you are or aren't a Springsteen fan, the next time he's in your neighbourhood, do take the time, because what you're seeing is a band still, if not at the top of their game, very close to it. And obviously Roy Bittan is a bucket list guest for the podcast, but Charlie Giordano as well, just amazing keyboard players on top. So highly recommended. Sorry, I couldn't resist that tangent.
Yeah, well, Springsteen and his bands over the years have been legendary for their professionalism and musicianship, but also their stamina, like how long they play for. And I think it's a really good point, isn't it? And I think a lot of we understand, not all, but a lot of our listeners and viewers are keyboard players who might be in bands, and I think you're right, though. If you play regularly, you do build up. Match fitness is a really good analogy for it. You get sharp, you know what you're doing, and when you have a bit of a break from it, it can take a little while to build that back up again too.
And so when you're like me in a band that only plays 6 or 8 gigs a year, I never have match fitness. I played a gig. I literally came off stage 26 hours ago, and I'm still suffering. So everything's sore.
You guys are getting busier, though. This is a new project you're in, and you guys are getting busy.
Yeah,
some good stuff lined up.
No, we're very lucky. And look, I'm actually, between the podcast and everything else, I'm very happy to only play 6, 8, 10 gigs a year. Some of us like to play 40 or 50, Paul Bindig, but I definitely don't have that stamina.
Some of us are insane, but anyway, we won't talk about that. I just wanted to circle back to something that our guest Tom said. And, thinking about, some of us play 8 gigs a year, some of us play 50, some of us play 150. Everyone has a different way of going about things. What I really liked about the interview was he's quite strategic, and in fact he used that word himself. He's quite strategic in his approach to his career, and he's quite proactive. So he's, he was saying, and he's, to me and to you, David, he's a young man now. He's in his early 30s, so I see him as a real young guy, but he was saying, 10 years before that, he was thinking about, well, I don't want to get stuck in a rut just playing this style of gig. I want to aspire to better things. And he proactively took steps to make that happen. And I feel like for all of us, it could be something different. We've all got different desires, what we want to do with our music. But that strategic approach, no matter what it is you want to achieve, I think that's it's the key to happiness, I think, is to be thinking about what you want to do next and working towards that. So I really got that out of the podcast. That was one of the key messages I took away. How about you?
Yeah, agreed totally. And that strategic view, and I mean, he grew up in a relatively small, Crewe's a city of around 50,000 people, says David, having Googled. But yeah, he obviously took a really proactive approach to his career, and there's definitely a lesson in that for all of us, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there we have it. It was an absolute pleasure. It's also a pleasure having you all listen. I promise it's not just marketing speak when I say we continue to grow. It's lovely hearing the amount of new listeners, whether it's the growth in our YouTube channel, which is still somewhat a small proportion. Most of you out there still listen on audio, whether it's in your car or exercising and so on, and we hugely appreciate that. So yeah, thank you. And also a shout out to our gold and silver supporters, Mr. Dewey Evans. Now, Dewey's going to join us in the coming month to 6 weeks on one of our live streams, and he has some really interesting perspectives and as a musician and a keyboard player himself. So I'm actually really looking forward to him joining us. A big shout out also to Tammy Catch from Tammy's Musical Stew. Thank you, Tammy. Tammy's been a very long-term supporter, and she has previously appeared on a live stream. We love having our supporters on there as well. Mr. Mike Wilcox from Midnight Mastering. Mike does a brilliant job, and Mike is actually going to be an upcoming guest, and I'll explain the context. It's not because he's a sponsor. Him and myself and another person had a very interesting period of history in music in the 1990s that we're going to discuss in some detail. That's sometime over the next few months. We haven't set a date for that yet. And last but not least, Dave and the team at the musicplayer.com forums. Dave Bryce was actually, I just realized everyone's been on our show. Dave Bryce was, I think, episode number 2 of the podcast. And as I've mentioned many, many times, we've been proud members of that forum for many years. So do check out the musicplayer.com forums, particularly the Keyboard Corner. Thank you all for listening. As I've already said, we'll be back again in a week or two. We've got some really interesting guests that are either about to schedule or have scheduled. I'm a bit excited in the run-up to the end of the year, Paul. And, we shall reconvene very, very soon. In the meantime, keep on playing.